Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic. This is where Ralph dresses up as a man from space.
A teenager accidentally travels back in time, nearly erases himself from existence, and has to make his parents fall in love while avoiding his own mom's advances. Sounds like a fever dream, right?
Come on out here! Help me take him in the house!
Yet somehow Back to the Future became the biggest movie of 1985, launched a trilogy that's still beloved decades later, and gave us one of the most iconic cars in cinema history. A car that, ironically, was absolutely terrible in real life. What you probably don't know is that the Marty McFly you love almost wasn't Michael J. Fox. Someone else played him for 5 whole weeks before getting fired. The original ending involved a nuclear test site that made zero logical sense. And the studio hated the title so much, they tried to rename it Spaceman from Pluto. Yes, really. Today, we're counting down 10 weird and wild facts about Back to the Future that'll change how you watch this classic.
Save the clock tower!
From dangerous stunts that almost killed the cast to a lawsuit that changed Hollywood forever. But before we hit 88 miles per hour, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that defined our childhoods. And drop a comment with your favorite Back to the Future moment, because we need to know, all right? Let's fire up the flux capacitor and jump into number 10. Number 10. Eric Stoltz was Marty McFly for 5 weeks. Michael J. Fox is Marty McFly. That's just a fact of the universe, like gravity or the DeLorean looking cool despite being a mechanical disaster. But here's the thing. For the first 5 weeks of production, someone else was living inside that red puffer vest, and it nearly killed the entire movie. Eric Stoltz was the original Marty. Not as a screen test, not as a backup plan, but as the actual contracted star filming actual scenes with the full cast and crew. Director Robert Zemeckis wanted Michael J. Fox from day one, but Fox was locked into his family ties contract, and NBC refused to let him go. So Zemeckis settled for Stoltz, a talented dramatic actor who'd just come off Mask.
Here, let me give you the number.
A heavy emotional film about a kid with a facial deformity. And that's exactly the problem. Stoltz treated Back to the Future like it was a Scorsese drama. He was method acting his way through a comedy about time-traveling teenagers. Between takes, he'd stay in character. He barely interacted with the crew. He played every scene with the emotional weight of someone whose dog just died, which might work for Mask, but definitely doesn't work for a movie where the hero rides a skateboard while hanging onto trucks. The crew started noticing immediately. Stoltz wasn't giving them the energy, the charm, the comedic timing the script desperately needed. But here's where it gets expensive. By the time Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg admitted they had a problem, they'd already filmed 40 scenes. That's weeks of work, hundreds of crew hours, and $3 million down the drain. In 1984, money, that was a catastrophic loss. But they couldn't keep going. The footage looked wrong, felt wrong, and everyone on set knew it except maybe Stoltz himself.
Eric is a really good actor, and I made the decision to put him in the movie, but...
So Zemeckis went back to Michael J. Fox, basically begging him to reconsider. Fox's schedule was impossible. He was shooting Family Ties during the day, which meant he could only film Back to the Future at night and on weekends. The man would be working 18-hour days for months, but Fox said yes anyway, because apparently sleep is optional when you're about to become a movie star. They scrapped everything Stoltz had filmed, recast Marty, and started over. Stoltz got paid his full contract and quietly exited stage left, probably wondering what the hell just happened. Decades later, some of his footage leaked online, and you can see exactly why it didn't work. He's playing Marty McFly like he's in a Tennessee Williams play. It's uncomfortable, it's intense, and it's absolutely wrong for this movie. The whole mess could have sunk the production, but instead, it gave us the Marty we actually needed. Number 9. The DeLorean was a terrible car and almost wasn't used. The DeLorean DMC-12 is one of the most iconic movie vehicles ever created, right up there with the Batmobile and the Ecto-1. It's sleek, it's stainless steel, those gull-wing doors are undeniably cool, and it looks like something alien technology would actually be built into. But here's the secret nobody tells you. As an actual car, the DeLorean was an absolute disaster. The original idea for the time machine wasn't even a car. In early drafts of the script, Doc Brown built his time machine into a refrigerator. Marty would climb inside, get sent back to 1955, and climb out in the past. Simple, weird, very Doc Brown. But Zemeckis realized this was a terrible idea for one horrifying reason. Kids might see the movie, think time travel is real, and lock themselves inside refrigerators trying to replicate it. So they pivoted to a car, specifically because it needed to hit 88 miles per hour to activate. That requires speed, motion, dramatic tension. A refrigerator doesn't give you any of that. But which car? It had to look futuristic, unusual, something that would believably house experimental technology. Someone suggested the DeLorean, and Zemeckis loved it immediately. It looked like it came from the future, which is exactly what they needed.
Well, it's a DeLorean, right?
Bear with me, Marty. All your questions will be answered.
The problem? The DeLorean could barely function. The car's top speed in real life was about 85 miles per hour, which is deliciously ironic for a movie where the whole plot hinges on reaching 88. The production team had to push the cars downhill or tow them with cables to get the speed they needed for certain shots. And they kept braking. Constantly. The gull-wing doors would jam. The engines would overheat. Electrical systems would fail at random. The production had multiple DeLoreans on set at all times because they knew at least one would be out of commission on any given day. Mechanics worked around the clock, just keeping them operational enough to film. The DeLorean Motor Company itself was a financial mess and collapsed in 1982, just a few years before Back to the Future came out. The cars were poorly made, overpriced, and the company's founder got caught up in a drug trafficking sting operation. The whole brand was a disaster. But then Zemeckis turned this failed automobile into a time machine, and suddenly the DeLorean became immortal. Kids who weren't even born when the car company went bankrupt grew up dreaming about owning one. The movie single-handedly gave the DeLorean a legacy it absolutely didn't earn on its own merits. Number 8. The film was rejected over 40 times before getting made. Back to the Future is one of the most successful films ever made. It dominated the box office in 1985, launched a beloved trilogy, created a merchandising empire, and became a permanent fixture of pop culture. But before any of that happened, it was rejected by every major studio in Hollywood, over 40 times. Zemeckis and screenwriter Bob Gale spent years pitching this script and getting doors slammed in their faces. Studios thought it was too weird, too niche, not commercial enough. Disney famously passed on it because they thought the subplot of Lorraine being attracted to Marty was inappropriate. Never mind that the entire point of that subplot is Marty being horrified and actively trying to stop it. Disney saw mother attracted to son and said absolutely not. Other studios just didn't get it. They didn't understand the tone, couldn't figure out how to market it, and weren't willing to gamble on a time travel comedy with no stars attached. This was before Michael J. Fox was locked in. back when the project had no heat and no momentum. The only reason the movie got made at all was Steven Spielberg. Zemeckis had directed Romancing the Stone, which became a surprise hit, and that success gave him just enough credibility to get Spielberg's production company, Amblin Entertainment, to take a chance. Spielberg greenlit the project, Universal came on board as the distributor, and suddenly, the movie everyone rejected was actually happening. The budget was $19 million, which sounds like a lot, but was considered modest for a sci-fi adventure film in 1984. Universal was nervous the entire time, convinced they'd backed the wrong horse. Then the movie came out and made over $380 million worldwide. It became the highest-grossing film of 1985, beating out Rocky IV and Rambo. Every studio that passed on it had to sit there and watch Back to the Future become a phenomenon while knowing they could have had it. That's the kind of regret that keeps executives up at night. 40 rejection letters. And then it becomes the biggest movie of the year. Hollywood in a nutshell. Number 7. The clock tower scene used real lightning and nearly killed people. The climax of Back to the Future hinges on one perfectly timed event. Lightning strikes the Hill Valley clock tower at exactly 10:04 p.m. Doc Brown has rigged a cable to channel that electricity into the DeLorean, and Marty has to hit 88 miles per hour at the precise moment the lightning hits.
Haven't invented any time machine.
Or he's stuck in 1955 forever. It's one of the most suspenseful sequences in the movie, and filming it was an absolute nightmare. This wasn't CGI. This was 1984. Everything you see on screen is practical effects, real stunts, and actual danger. The clock tower was a real location on the Universal backlot, and they rigged it with high-voltage electrical equipment that could have killed someone if anything went wrong. Christopher Lloyd spent hours hanging off that clock tower for real.
Haven't invented any time machine.
He's up there clinging to the minute hand, trying to reconnect a cable while a storm rages around him. And it's not a stunt double. That's Lloyd, harnessed in, but genuinely dangling from a building while wind machines blast him and rain towers drench everything. The lightning effects were practical pyrotechnics timed to the millisecond. The crew had to coordinate explosions, electrical charges, and camera angles simultaneously while Lloyd acted his heart out, and Fox drove the DeLorean at high speed toward a specific mark. One miscalculation and either the shot doesn't work or someone gets electrocuted. They filmed this sequence over multiple nights because they needed darkness, and the complexity required endless takes. The crew worked 12-hour overnight shifts, resetting equipment, checking safety protocols, making sure nobody died, bringing this scene to life. The special effects team was working with enough voltage to be genuinely dangerous, and everyone on set knew one wrong move could end catastrophically. And it paid off. The clock tower sequence is the most visually spectacular and emotionally satisfying moment in the entire film. You feel the tension, the danger, the desperation. When that lightning finally strikes and the DeLorean vanishes in a blaze of fire trails, it's cathartic because you know how hard everyone worked to make it happen. Modern audiences watching on streaming don't realize they're seeing a sequence where real people risked real harm to create movie magic the old-fashioned way. Sometimes the best cinema comes from controlled chaos and hoping nobody gets electrocuted. Number 6. Ronald Reagan quoted the movie in a State of the Union address. Back to the Future has a throwaway joke that accidentally involved the President of the United States, and he thought it was hilarious.
As they said in the film, Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
When Marty tells 1955 Doc Brown that Ronald Reagan is president in 1985, Doc's response is perfect. Ronald Reagan, the actor, then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis. It's a solid gag. In 1955, Reagan was just a B-movie actor doing westerns and corporate spokesman gigs. The idea of him running the country seemed absurd. But here's what nobody expected. Reagan actually watched the movie, loved that line, and kept referencing it in speeches, not once, twice, including during a State of the Union address, where he quoted Back to the Future while talking about America's future. The President of the United States used a joke about himself from a time travel comedy as rhetorical material for national policy speeches. Zemeckis found out about this from news reports and couldn't believe it. Reagan wasn't offended. He genuinely thought it was funny, which honestly tracks for a guy whose entire political brand was self-deprecating charm. He'd spent decades being underestimated, and he leaned into it. The fact that a huge blockbuster movie used his name as the punchline to an absurdist joke just gave him more material. The State of the Union moment is particularly wild because it means Reagan's speechwriters watched Back to the Future, recognized the reference potential, and actually wrote it into one of the most important speeches a president gives. They saw a time travel comedy and thought, yes, this belongs in our formal address to Congress. Other politicians have appeared in films or been referenced, but very few have embraced it the way Reagan did. Most would have ignored it or gotten quietly annoyed. Reagan turned it into free publicity and a talking point. He understood pop culture in a way most presidents never bothered to. So yeah, the 40th president was a Back to the Future fan. And Michael J. Fox can say he indirectly wrote material for a State of the Union address.
Christ. Jesus Christ, Doc, you disintegrated Einstein.
That's a weird legacy for a movie about a teenager and a DeLorean. Number 5. The original ending was much darker and made no sense. All right, here's the big one. The fact the title promised. The original ending to Back to the Future that got scrapped because it made absolutely no sense and would have ruined the entire movie. In early drafts of the script, the movie didn't end with Doc Brown showing up in a flying DeLorean to whisk Marty and Jennifer off to the future. It ended at a nuclear test site in the Nevada desert. Seriously. The original plan was that Doc needed to steal plutonium for the time machine, but instead of stealing it from Libyan terrorists, he was going to extract it from a nuclear device at an atomic testing facility. The final scene would have had Marty and Doc sneaking into this government test site, grabbing the plutonium, and escaping just before detonation. Let's unpack how insane this is. First, it completely changes Doc's character. Stealing from terrorists is morally gray, but understandable for a desperate scientist. Breaking into a military facility to harvest weapons. Grade nuclear material is legitimately criminal and wildly dangerous. Second, the logistics make no sense. How does Doc even access a test site? How do they survive a nuclear blast? The script never adequately answered these questions. Zemeckis and Gale eventually realized this ending was a tonal disaster. The whole movie is a fun adventure about a kid trying to get his parents together. You can't end that with nuclear testing facilities and government espionage.
Did you rip that off?
It's too dark, too serious, and too disconnected from everything that came before. So, they rewrote it. The flying DeLorean ending happened almost by accident. They needed Doc to come back, needed a cliffhanger for a potential sequel, and someone suggested, what if the car could fly? Zemeckis loved it immediately. It's optimistic, surprising, and sets up infinite story possibilities. And that final line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads," wasn't even in the original script. Christopher Lloyd improvised it during filming, and Zemeckis kept it in because it was perfect. It became one of the most quoted movie lines of all time, and it only exists because they scrapped an ending involving nuclear test sites that would have killed the entire franchise before it started. Number 4. The Johnny B. Good scene created a perfect time travel paradox. The Johnny B. Good scene is the emotional and comedic climax of the entire film. Marty's on stage at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, desperately trying to make sure his parents kiss so he doesn't fade from existence. The band starts playing, Marty takes over on guitar, and suddenly, this 1955 high school dance turns into a rock concert, 20 years ahead of its time. Michael J. Fox couldn't actually play guitar at that level, but he studied the hell out of rock guitarists to make his performance believable. Specifically, he borrowed moves from Pete Townshend of The Who and Eddie Van Halen. The windmill arm motion, the duck walk across the stage, the exaggerated power stance, all lifted directly from rock legends and crammed into one 3-minute performance. The irony of the scene is delicious. Marty's playing Johnny B. Good, a song from 1958. In the movie's timeline, the song doesn't exist yet. Marty's cousin, Marvin Berry, is in the band, and during the performance he literally calls Chuck Berry on the phone and holds up the receiver so Chuck can hear this new sound he's been looking for. Marty McFly accidentally invents rock and roll by playing a song that wouldn't exist without rock and roll already existing. It's a perfect time travel paradox wrapped in a joke. Fox's performance was entirely playback. He's miming to a pre-recorded track, but he committed so hard to the physicality that it feels live. Then Marty gets too into it and starts shredding like it's a Van Halen concert. He does behind-the-head solos, drops to the floor, goes full Eddie Van Halen, and the 1955 teenagers just stare at him in confused horror. "I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet," Marty says, backing away slowly. "But your kids are gonna love it." It's the perfect encapsulation of the movie's entire theme. Marty doesn't belong in 1955, but his presence there accidentally shapes the future. The scene works as comedy, as character development, as plot resolution, and as meta-commentary on how culture evolves. And the fact that Fox sold it with such commitment, despite not being a real guitarist, is a testament to how well he understood the character. The Johnny B. Good scene is why Back to the Future isn't just a time travel movie. It's a movie about how the past and future are constantly influencing each other in ways we don't even realize. Number 3. The Twin Pines Mall. Detail most people never catch. There's a background detail in Back to the Future that's so subtle most people watch the movie 5 times before catching it. And once you notice it, you realize just how obsessed Zemeckis was with making time travel consequences actually matter. The movie opens at the Twin Pines Mall. Doc Brown's about to demonstrate his time machine, Libyan terrorists are about to show up in a VW van, and Marty's about to accidentally go back to 1955. Standard Thursday night stuff. But pay attention to that mall name because it's not random set dressing. When Marty lands in 1955, he's in the same location, except it's now the Peabody family farm. Old Man Peabody comes running out with a shotgun, screaming about space creatures, while Marty frantically tries to reverse a DeLorean that handles like a shopping cart with a broken wheel. During the chaos, the DeLorean crashes directly through Peabody's pine tree fence. You see 2 pine trees, and Marty absolutely demolishes one of them. Flash forward to the end of the film. Marty returns to 1985, rushes to save Doc from the terrorists. Everything plays out exactly like before, except this time Doc's wearing a bulletproof vest. Crisis averted. Everyone's happy. The timeline is mostly intact. But when Marty looks up at the mall sign, it's changed. It now reads Lone Pine Mall. One tiny action in 1955 had a permanent ripple effect 30 years later. The Peabody family lost a tree, probably replanted with just one pine, and eventually, when the land got developed into a shopping mall, somebody named it after the single remaining tree. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it joke that proves Zemeckis understood time travel better than most sci-fi directors even try to. And it's not the only one. Marty's dad goes from pathetic loser to confident sci-fi author. Biff goes from bully to car-waxing lackey. Even the McFly family house gets upgraded. Every change Marty made in the past shows up in tangible ways in the present, and the movie trusts you to notice without spelling it out in dialogue. That's the level of detail we're working with here. The kind of movie where even the mall signs have character arcs. It's the reason Back to the Future holds up so well on repeat viewings. There's always another detail you missed, another consequence you didn't catch the first time. Number 2, the production was finished. Just days before it aired. Was Back to the Future really animated right up until airtime? Well, this isn't a cartoon, but the production timeline was just as insane. This whole movie was a full-scale scramble from day one, made even worse by the Eric Stoltz situation, eating up weeks and millions of dollars. The shooting schedule was brutal. They were filming 6 days a week, sometimes 7, trying to make up for the weeks lost on Stoltz footage they couldn't use. The crew was exhausted. The budget was hemorrhaging, and Universal was getting increasingly nervous about whether this movie would actually come together. Post-production was even more chaotic. The special effects team was working on the lightning sequences, the DeLorean time travel effects, and all the practical elements right up until the last possible moment. The sound design, the music integration, the final color timing, everything was happening simultaneously in a desperate race to meet the release date. The film was locked and delivered to theaters with barely any time to spare. Unlike modern movies that finish months in advance for marketing purposes, Back to the Future was genuinely completed at the absolute deadline. There was no safety net, no buffer period, no time to second-guess creative choices. And somehow, despite the chaos, the impossible schedule, the recasting disaster, and the financial pressure, they delivered a masterpiece. The movie works perfectly. The pacing is tight, the effects hold up, the performances are iconic. You'd never know while watching it that the entire production was held together with duct tape and prayer. Sometimes the best art comes from controlled panic and talented people refusing to fail. Number 1. It was almost called Spaceman from Pluto. Back to the Future is a perfect title. It's clear, it's clever. It tells you exactly what the movie's about while still leaving room for mystery. But the studio hated it. They wanted to change it to something they thought would sell better. Their brilliant suggestion? Spaceman from Pluto. Yes, really. A Universal executive actually looked at this script about time travel, teenage romance, and rock and roll, and decided the title should reference a spaceman from a planet that has nothing to do with anything in the movie. The logic was that sci-fi movies with space in the title performed well at the box office, so clearly this movie needed space in the title too. Never mind that the movie takes place entirely on Earth and involves zero spaceships, aliens, or interplanetary travel. Zemeckis and Gale were horrified. They fought the studio hard, arguing that Spaceman from Pluto sounded like a cheap B-movie from the 1950s, which, yes, is kind of the point of the objection. The title made the film sound campy and ridiculous instead of the smart, heartfelt adventure it actually was. But the studio wouldn't let it go. They kept pushing, kept insisting, kept acting like this was the hill they wanted to die on. Marketing departments got involved, executives had meetings about meetings, And the whole thing spiraled into exactly the kind of corporate nonsense that kills creativity. So Steven Spielberg stepped in with a masterstroke of passive-aggressive genius. He sent the executive a memo thanking him for the hilarious joke title suggestion and saying everyone got a great laugh out of it. The memo was worded so politely, so professionally, that it gave the executive a face-saving exit. He could either admit he was serious and looked like an idiot, or he could accept that Spielberg was calling his bluff and drop it. He dropped it. The title stayed Back to the Future, the movie became a massive hit, and Spaceman from Pluto was never spoken of again except as a cautionary tale about studio interference. And there you have it. 12 weird facts about Back to the Future that prove this movie is even more fascinating behind the scenes than it is on screen. From firing the original Marty to fighting off terrible title changes to nearly ending with a nuclear test site, this production was chaotic from beginning to end. And somehow that chaos created perfection. So, which fact shocked you the most? Did you know about Eric Stoltz? Have you ever caught the Twin Pines to Lone Pine Mall change? Drop your thoughts in the comments because we need to know. And while you're down there, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that shaped our childhoods.